I should say that Ambreena's presentation has been very comprehensive and very sharp and perceptive, and so I really can't add to the general framework within which land policies are being pursued. I'd like to make a couple of points about the new legislation, but my wife Jill, sitting there, has done more work in this area. Katiba Institute continues to be engaged, and we work with other NGOs, and recently on community land and legislation on the relationship between the Ministry of Lands and the National Land Commission, defining their roles, we think, in a way which is contrary to the Constitution. The Constitution language, unfortunately, is not very clear on this. I think the land policy that of 2009, which Ambreena mentioned, is clearer on the relationship between the Commission and the Ministry of Lands. We find it actually quite strange that there should be a Ministry of Lands. Not many countries have such a ministry. There are issues about land which belong to the planning ministry or agriculture or something, but in Kenya, the most coveted ministry, almost the most coveted ministry, is the Ministry of Lands. Defining the role of the Commission vis-à-vis the ministry has gone through. It is, we think it's extremely unfair. We try to encourage the chair of the Land Commission to make a fuss about it. We prepared even documents for him, setting out the issues. At long last, he seems to be coming out a little bit to try to defend his commission, but it's probably too late. So that, I think, is a very major change from the system that Ambreena has set out for us, which is, I think, a more accurate reflection of what the Constitution intended to happen. Another issue that I think is worth looking at, and that comes under the area of community lands, is that there is a kind of division of responsibility between the national government and the county governments, which constitute the basis of our devolution. And we always thought that community land, which is by which what we mean is land which is owned by the communities in traditional understandings of land ownership, which didn't give absolute rights, which were shared by the whole community, and the whole community should have say in alienation of land and so on. So this category of community land, which previously I suppose you might have called customary land rights, was constitutionalized because we wanted to protect the ordinary people, especially living in the rural areas, whose land was in very great danger of appropriation. And so we still have that legislation to go through, though I think early bills were being prepared.
There's a bill before Parliament now.
It's before Parliament now, yes. I think the committee to draft it was established in 2012, and so it just shows how contentious it is. And there's a feeling that the national government is trying to oust the county governments from that. And that is a very, very critical issue because it affects the land which is still owned by communities. Over the years, there's been this attrition, and this has been a great hardship for these communities. So it seems to me, both on community land and as well as the relationship between the ministry and the Land Commission, we are losing out. I think people are losing confidence in its leadership. So that's a very major issue and doesn't bode well for the future. Another development which is sort of affecting land is major infrastructure projects, huge rail lines and roads and harbors are being established at an enormous cost, mostly by Chinese companies now. And all of these projects involve the taking of land away from the people who own it, live on it. Their livelihood is based on these lands. And this is a major project, major problem, which I don't think is sufficiently acknowledged. We, Katiba Institute, are again involved in some litigation to protect the rights of these communities. But the ways of the law are slow, as we know. Kenya is slower than most. And so at least it's, and in some cases when we litigate, there are, the case is sort of, adjourned and so on. At least nothing can change in the status quo. But in this area, I'm afraid the government is proceeding regardless of the fact that the case is before the court. Another area which I think we should say a little bit about, which I hope Jill will say about, is the forests. Forest has become also a very sort of involved issue. It has international dimensions on the environment, carbon, whatever it's called. People are negotiating certain payments in return of not cutting down forests and so on. And we believe that we still have some forests left, not many, and our water tars are under great, I don't know, under pressure, but certainly their capacity to deliver water regularly is undermined. And it is seen, I think, by bureaucrats and by ministers as the next big land grab. And so we have been involved with some communities, forest people. The Constitution assures every community with its own distinctive lifestyle who want to maintain that lifestyle. And forest people are very prominent among that. We don't want to force any community to abandon its traditional way of life and move to towns or take different occupations. And there's a kind of tension, at least the government sees, as between letting these people stay in their ancient traditional homelands and preserving the forests. And we have, the litigation goes on, and I think we have sometimes a good ruling, and the government ignores it, despite contempt charges against the Attorney General. But the battle is not lost, but I'm not sure how far we are going to win. And Jill has been very much involved in the research on these cases, and I hope she will say something. There are questions of eviction and the new legislation that has also, I think, gone through. Detracts greatly from somewhat from the international norms about evictions. And we have litigated a lot on evictions ourselves. We got good rulings from the courts, but they are constantly ignored. And this is a problem I want to emphasize, that we established a very strong judicial system, knowing that perhaps the executive and the legislature will continue to be the old guard, but that the judiciary perhaps could be changed, and every judge is vetted, have always been vetted for integrity and competence when the new constitution came into being. Some judges were thrown out, some remained, and we gave a lot of authority to the judiciary. You don't need any rules of standing. If you are protecting a national interest, as defined in the Constitution, then anybody can go. And we have gone to court many times, not because we have an interest as an institution, but because it's a national interest. And But again, that system is weakening, and maybe I'll end up on two small points. One is that we had a very, to my mind, very moving ceremony in the Uhuru Park in the middle of Nairobi about 2 weeks ago, when the British High Commissioner acknowledged the wrong done to the Mau Mau people. As you know, there was litigation in Britain, and it was resolved by an agreement between Her Majesty's government and this association of Mau Mau leaders, that the case will be withdrawn and there will be a financial settlement. And among that, in that arrangement was that Britain would build a memorial to people who died in the cause of freedom. So it was a very moving, and the High Commissioner gave a wonderful speech, and so did the leader of the Mau Mau Association. And but then the point was being made, and there was something like, what figures are disputed, but someone said 30,000, 25,000 people had come from different parts of the country who were associated in some way with the Mau Mau. And some of them said, it's nice to have this memorial. We fought for land, we still have no land. And that is the absolute truth, because what happened when Mau Mau were arrested, what they used to call loyalists, took over all their land. So when some years later these people were released, there was no land. And that issue remains unresolved to this day. 5 years is a very important period, because we knew there will be resistance to this new constitution with its orientation different from before, with emphasis on social justice, past injustices, this and that. We had provided a very detailed program of implementation in a schedule. And the Commission on Implementation, which Ambreena mentioned, was established, not with quite the same authority as we had recommended, but nevertheless established to oversee the implementation of the legislation specified in that document, in the Constitution, as well as the institutions that had to be set up, including the Land Commission, other independent bodies, and so on. And so 5 years is a very critical period for us to assess, well, what has happened. And I think it is indeed too early, but I also said last night, not frivolously, but seriously, that Zhou Enlai was once asked by a journalist what he thought of the French Revolution, and he said, oh, it's too early. So we don't think it's too early to make an interim assessment, and we do believe that the progress has been much slower than we expected. The judiciary, I think, has improved a lot, especially the division on the Constitution and administrative law. They've done some wonderful judgments, and in the face of great pressure from the government. So that's been a positive thing, and we have a good Chief Justice, totally committed to the values of the Constitution. Civil society, and you talked about that, Ambreena, I'm afraid sort of lost its way. These problems are very large, and they're not solved by having press conferences and issuing, communiques. They require a different kind of strategy from the earlier days when we were lobbying for a good constitution. And I believe, and I think I said that last night, if I didn't, I should have said, that I think ultimately this constitution has to be protected by the people. It was their constitution. Most ideas in there are ideas that people gave us, and ultimately they have to take responsibility. But the fact is that our politics are highly ethnicized, and so people will vote on ethnic lines. And in a kind of paradoxical way, maybe the crazy, massive land grabbing that is still going on might just make Kikuyus feel Kikuyus have done no better except few and the people in Rift Valley, the deputy president's group, haven't done any better. So at least they realize that perhaps that we are being exploited by our own leaders, and that might start a popular movement, which is what Kenya needs desperately. Thank you very much.